Okay, in this week's lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to master out the ideas of the different states of the market. There's different conditions that the market flows in. Now, generically speaking, everyone goes through, the market has three different stages, the range, the channel, and the trend. But did you master it? I'm going to say this every single week until your brain says, I am not going to do anything until I master it. I'm not going to even take out the trash until I master it. So this is something I want you to start taking a habit of doing in your life, mastering anything that you do. If you master it, you notice everything. You notice the little subtle details. Okay? So we're going to go in through all these courses. We're going to start with the ranges, and I'm going to explain how we look at ranges and how you should be looking at ranges going forth from here. And then we're going to go into the other aspects. So ranges first, okay? So let's start with the lesson here. This is the Euro USD on the 15-minute time frame. And we're going to start off with, you have an understanding of buyers and sellers already, right? So we're looking at sellers coming in here with lower highs, lower lows, and stuff like that. And with the lower highs, lower lows, it reaches this stage here, where if I put my line right there, you can see this stage never gets crossed below, neither does this stage ever get crossed above. Now, you can start saying right now that this is a range, okay? Okay, how many of you guys watching this right now think this is a range? Just speak it out or say it in your head, that's a range. How many of you guys are thinking, well, that's still a trend state because it's downtrend. This is below this break area and it's holding, which is seller's territory. Okay? How many of you guys might thinking, well, if I look at this like that, it almost looks parallel. Like, oh man, that's a channel. Different perspectives. And they all could be correct. It's how your perception of the market goes that makes the difference, right? So if it's your perspective against my perspective against a third person's perspective, then one of us has to be right. And then next time we do this, again, one of us has to be right because someone's going to be wrong, right? It's always going to be in that cycle. So it's just an opinion of perspectives. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you my perspective on how I see things, and I want you to try it out. Okay? Everything I always teach you guys is don't take my word for it. Go do it. Just get into it. Okay? So let's take a look at this again. So here comes the downtrend, pulls back, downtrend again. Very weak, very gradual, and then it dips below. Once it dips below, it maintains grounds below this area. I personally look at this as still trend mode. And this is a miniature range. A miniature range is basically looking at this. Basically, imagine if you're looking at this on a different time frame. Okay, we're going to discuss time frames as well. That's one of the topics in your course coming up. So imagine if you're looking at a different time frame. Notice how big this would look if you were looking at this on a smaller time frame. Notice how tiny it's going to look if I go up a time frame. Right? So what does it mean to you then if I go up to the 1 hour? What does it mean to you then if I go down to the 5 minutes? Right? Perspective, again and again. So, if I keep a bird's eye view perspective, I see a trend. Once I keep a bird's eye view perspective, we can see the breach has happened going down and it's broken below this line here. Now, once it's broken below this line, he comes all the way down to here, swings up, swings down, no lower low, swings up, makes a slight higher high, and now we don't know if it's a range or a trend, or it's a trend up until now. And then we start noticing certain conditions like, okay, this was the lowest point, which had no lower low from this guy. Okay, so that's the lowest point right there. And for the highest point, that's the highest point because we went above this guy and we held above there. So that's the highest point up there. Okay, but going forth, the market comes down a bit, goes up again, comes down a bit. Now, he hasn't gone below this, he hasn't gone above that. But we don't know it's a range yet until we see some data. Now, one of the data that we're going to see at this stage is, oh, look at this. He just dips right below. It's like, oh, he's breaking. The trend resumes. But once the trend comes back, Now, what I like to see are fakers. You see, earlier, when I see stuff like this happen, there was no faker. He held below. Here, he's holding below, but even below the below, if you want to put it that way, he made a faker, which means we're now working with something that has power on both sides, which means power on this guy who's saying, we're going to sell everything we got, we got power from this guy saying, you ain't coming down here. Every time you come down, I'm going to smack it back up. Now we're working with touch number 1, touch number 2, and incident number 3. Now, generally, people need 4 touches for a range. But I'm going to teach you how to do this with 1 touch, 2 touch, incident number 3, with all this information ahead of time. Okay? You have to read all that information to get to this stage. Once you get to that stage, now you're stalking it like a hawk. So, as a range trader, how do you trade ranges? We got 1, we got 2, we got 3. So obviously on the 4th point, we're going to be hitting the sells, right? So let me drag this all out. And then it's like, let's take a look at this here. Now, how come the sell doesn't activate from there? That's a range. The sell should work. Now, if you remember from the previous lesson, what we talked about, the fading concept of if that buyer is coming up super hot, pulls back only 15%, and comes in even hotter, you think he's willing to give up his throne? Is that rubber band man tired at all to you? Keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. As he comes down and he goes up, he tries again, and as he comes down again, and then he tries to make a higher high, pokes through and comes right back down, again, incident. Okay, we're going to be talking about probes and all this stuff in one of the lessons, and it's a very, very interesting lesson. I think that's going to be towards week 5 or 6 or something like that. Very interesting area. Okay, these probes, these are incidents, and these incidents tell you a story that someone is there. Someone is there. Okay, all this time you have the awareness that it's seller's territory, but at the same time you're looking at this as a range. Because in a range, you're trying to execute the trade with an understanding of it's in this zone. Okay, it's in this zone or area that I want to be hitting the stuff. Okay, this is close to the zone, but the story doesn't make any sense on the way up. This is close to the zone, but I can't quite hit it there yet because he's too strong on this way up. It's like he made a higher high. But the moment he crashes right back down, right there, it's like, aha, gotcha. Now I know what's going on. I have a better understanding of what's going on. So now we're working with a sell side. Now, you might be able to argue with me that, Naveen, isn't that a little mini range there? Yes, but we're not looking at it as a range in those sequences, not these little bitty tiny ranges. Remember that. We're not working with stuff like that. We're working with a range that has some data in it. Okay, we're working with a trend that has some data in it. Leave out the minuscule stuff, the little itty bitty tiny stuff. Leave them out. Get an idea like a bird's eye. Be the eagle in the sky. Okay, once that thing starts coming down, you start seeing that, okay, now that I know the sequence, the flow, and I put together my story of the sellers and buyers, I put together a story of the fading out of the momentum of the buyers. I put together a story that it's a range, so I want to be close to the top as possible to execute it. You put all that together, and you now increased your ability to hit the trade as far away from death as possible, because this is death down here. Because right around here, at the bottom of the range, you don't want to be activating your sells here trying to chase the market. That's the worst spot to do it. But unfortunately, a lot of people in the industry do this. They hit it only once it starts to move. Right? So do you guys agree with me now? Anticipate, don't participate. If you participate, horrible prices. Horrible, horrible prices. Anticipate. Anticipate. Okay? So let's move on to some examples for this.